Hare Krishna. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So we're continuing with our reading in Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Srila Prabhupada's summary study of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. I feel today is a difficult day for me in some ways because my very dear friend Bhakti Churu Swami is battling for his life with coronavirus. And so I'm thinking of him when I chant this mantra from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, begging Krishna to protect us and save us, and respect Bhakti Churu Swami. I hope he stays with us. But of course, Krishna has his plans for him. Either way, he's a liberated soul, and he'll be serving Krishna as Krishna wants. Krishna, 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 Rama, Raghava, Rama, Raghava, Krishna, 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 Prabhupada put this beginning at the introduction to his Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's from the Chaitanya, to his introduction to the Krishna book. This is from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 7. So we're continuing where we left off. If you have the Krishna book, this is the paperback. It's 185, page 158. And it begins like this. If you may be following along. If not, you don't need to. In the Upanishads, it is stated, and this is Brahma talking, this is the continuation of his prayers. In the Upanishads, it is stated that the Supreme Brahman is as effulgent as the sun and is the origin of everything, and that anyone who can understand that original person becomes liberated from the material, conditioned life. Anyone who can simply be attached to you by devotional service can know your actual position, birth, appearance, disappearance, and activities. As confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, simply by understanding your constitutional position, appearance, and disappearance, one can be immediately elevated to the spiritual kingdom after quitting this present body. Therefore, to cross over the ocean of material nescience, an intelligent person takes shelter of your lotus feet and is easily transferred to the spiritual world. That's a quotation from the Bhagavad Gita 4.9 that's embedded in that particular paragraph. There are many so-called meditators who do not know that you are the Supreme Soul. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, you are the Supreme Soul present in everyone's heart. Therefore, there is no necessity of one's meditating on something beyond you. One who is always absorbed in meditation on your original form of Krishna easily crosses over the ocean of material nescience. But persons who do not know that you are the Supreme Soul remain within this material world in spite of their so-called meditation. If by the association of your devotees a person comes to the knowledge that Lord Krishna is the original super soul, then it is possible for him to cross over the ocean of material ignorance. For instance, when a person mistakes a rope for a snake, he is filled with fear, but as soon as he understands the rope is not a snake, he is liberated from fear. If one understands you, therefore, through your personal teachings, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, or through the teachings of your pure devotees, as stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, and all other Vedic literatures, if one realizes that you are the ultimate goal of understanding, he need no longer fear this material existence. So-called liberation and bondage have no meaning for a person who is already engaged in your devotional service, just as a rope is not fearful to a person who knows that it is not a snake. A devotee knows that this material world belongs to you, and he therefore engages everything in your transcendental loving service. Thus, there is no bondage for him. For a person who is already situated in the sun planet, there is no question of the appearance or disappearance of the sun in the name of day or night. It is also said that you, Krishna, are just like the sun, and that Maya is like darkness. When the sun is present, there is no question of darkness, and for those who always remain in your presence by engaging in your service, there is no question of bondage or liberation. They are already liberated. On the other hand, persons who falsely think themselves to be liberated without taking shelter of your lotus feet fall down because their intelligence is not pure. If one thinks that the Supersoul is something different from your personality, and thus search out Supersoul or the Supreme Brahman somewhere else, in the forest or in the caves of the Himalayas, his condition is very lamentable. Your teachings in the Bhagavad Gita are that one should give up all other processes of self-realization and simply surrender to you, for that is complete. Sarvadharman parijajya mamekam saranam braja. Because you are the supreme in every respect, those who are searching after the Brahman effulgence are also searching after you. And those who are searching after Supersoul realization are also searching after you. You state in the Bhagavad Gita that you yourself, by your partial representation as the Supersoul, have entered into this material cosmic manifestation. You are present in everyone's heart, and there's no need to search out the Supersoul anywhere else. If someone does so, he is simply in ignorance. One who is transcendental to such a position understands that you are unlimited. You are both within and without. Therefore, your presence is everywhere. Instead of searching for Supersoul anywhere else, a devotee only concentrates his mind on you within. Actually, one who is liberated from the material concept of life can search for you. Others cannot. The example of thinking the rope to be a snake is applicable only to those who are still in ignorance of you. Actually, when one mistakes a rope for a snake, the existence of the snake is only within the mind. The existence of Maya, similarly, is only within the mind. You should think of that for a while. Maya is nothing but ignorance of your personality. When one forgets your personality, that is the conditioned state of Maya. Therefore, one who is fixed upon you, both internally and externally, is not illusioned. One who has attained a little result of devotional service can understand your glories. Even one striving for Brahman realization or Paramatma realization cannot understand these features of your personality unless you bestow on him a result of at least a slight bit of devotional service. One may be the spiritual master of many impersonalists, or he may go to the forest or to a mountain cave and meditate as a hermit for many, many years, but he cannot understand your glories without being favored by a slight degree of devotional service. Brahman realization or Paramatma realization are also not possible even after one searches for many, many years, unless one is touched by the wonderful effect of devotional service. Therefore, my dear Lord, I pray that I may be so fortunate that in this life or in another life, wherever I may take my birth, I may be counted as one of your devotees. Wherever I may be, I pray that I may be engaged in your devotional service. I do not even care what form of life I get in the future, because I can see that even in the form of cows and calves or cowherd boys, the devotees are so fortunate to always be engaged in your transcendental loving service and association. I therefore wish to be one of them instead of such an exalted person as I am now, for I am full of ignorance. The gopis and the cows of Vrindavan are so fortunate that they have been able to supply their breast milk to you. The gopis meaning the older gopis, because it's common for a baby to be nursed not just by the mother but by her other contemporaries who were also lactating at the time, so that when it means the other gopis and the cows also, their mothers. So the cows have a maternal relationship toward Krishna. Persons who are engaged in performing great sacrifices and offering many valuable goats in sacrifice cannot attain the perfection of understanding you, but simply by devotional service, these innocent village women and cows are all able to satisfy you with their milk. You have drunk their milk to satisfaction, yet you are never satisfied as much by those engaged in performing sacrifices. I am simply surprised, therefore, with the fortunate position of Maharaj Nanda, Mother Yashoda, and the cowherd men and gopis, because you, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth, are existing here as their most intimate, lovable object. My dear Lord, no one can actually appreciate the good fortune of these residents of Vrindavan. We are all demigods, controlling deities of the various senses of the living entities, and we are proud of enjoying such privileges, but actually there is no comparison between our position and the position of these fortunate residents of Vrindavan, because they are actually relishing your presence and enjoying your association by dint of their sensory activities. We may be proud of being controllers of the senses, but here the residents of Vrindavan are so transcendental that they are not under our control. Actually, they are enjoying their senses through service to you. I shall therefore consider myself fortunate to be given a chance to take a birth in this land of Vrindavan in any of my future lives. My dear Lord, I am therefore not interested in either material opulences or liberation. I am most humbly praying at your lotus feet for you to please give me any sort of birth within this Vrindavan forest, so that I may be able to be favored by the dust of the feet of some of the devotees of Vrindavan. If I'm given the chance to grow as a humble blade of grass in this land, that would be a glorious birth for me. But if I am not so fortunate to take birth within the forest of Vrindavan, I beg to be allowed to take birth outside the immediate area of Vrindavan, so that when the devotees go out, they will walk over me. Even that would be a great fortune for me. I am just aspiring for a birth in which I'll be smeared by the dust of the devotees' feet, because I can see that everyone here is simply full of Krishna consciousness. No one here knows anything but the lotus feet of Krishna, or Mukunda, for which the Vedas themselves are searching. It is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that the purpose of Vedic knowledge is to find Krishna. All the Vedas are just a searching after me. And it is said that in the Brahma Samhita, that it is very difficult to find Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by systematic reading of the Vedic literatures, but he is very easily available through the mercy of a pure devotee. Vedeshu durlabham adurlabham atma bhakta. The pure devotees of Vrindavan are fortunate because they can see Mukunda, Lord Krishna, all the time. This word Mukunda can be understood in two ways. Muk means liberation. Lord Krishna can give liberation and therefore transcendental bliss. This word also refers to his smiling face, which is just like the kunda flower. Mukha means face. The kunda flower is very beautiful and it appears to be smiling. Thus, the comparison is made. The difference between the pure devotees of Vrindavan and devotees in other places is that the residents of Vrindavan have no other desire but to be associated with Krishna. Krishna, being very kind to his devotees, fulfills their desire because they always want Krishna's association. The Lord is always prepared to give it to them. The devotees of Vrindavan are also spontaneous lovers. They are not required to strictly follow regulative principles because they are already naturally developed in transcendental love for Krishna. Regulative principles are required for persons who have not achieved such a position of spontaneous love. Brahma is also a devotee of the Lord, but he is an ordinary devotee, subject to following the regulative principles. He prays to Krishna to give him the chance to take birth in Vrindavan so that he might be elevated to the platform of spontaneous love. Lord Brahma continued, "My Lord, sometimes I am puzzled as to how your Lordship will be able to repay in gratitude the devotional service of these residents of Vrindavan." Interesting question, huh? How can you repay them? "Although I know that you are the supreme source of all benedictions, I am puzzled to know how you will be able to repay all the service that you are receiving from these residents of Vrindavan. I think of how you are so kind, so magnanimous that even Putana, who came to cheat you by dressing herself as a very affectionate mother, was awarded liberation and the actual position of a mother. And other demons belonging to the same family, such as Aghasura and Bakasura, were also favored with liberation and achieved you. Under the circumstances, I am puzzled. These residents of Vrindavan have given you everything: their bodies, their minds, their love, their homes, their possessions. Everything is being utilized for your purpose. So how will you be able to repay your debt to them? You have already given yourself to Putana. I surmise that you shall ever remain a debtor to the residents of Vrindavan, being unable to repay their loving service. My Lord, I can understand that the super excellent quality of the service rendered by the residents of Vrindavan is due to their spontaneously engaging all natural instincts in your loving service. It is said that attachment for material objects and a home is due to illusion, which makes a living entity conditioned in the material world. But that is only the case for persons who are not Krishna conscious. In the case of the residents of Vrindavan, such obstructions as attachment to hearth and home are non-existent, because their attachment has been directed to you, and their homes have been converted into temples by your constant presence there, and because they have forgotten everything for your sake, there is no impediment. For a Krishna-conscious person, there is no such thing as impediments due to attachment for hearth and home, nor is there illusion. I can also understand that your appearance as a small cowherd boy, a child of the cowherd men, is not at all a material activity. You are so much obliged by their affection that you are here to inspire them with more loving service by your transcendental presence. In Vrindavan, there is no distinction between material and spiritual, because everything is dedicated to your loving service. My dear Lord, your Vrindavan pastimes are simply to inspire your devotees. If someone takes your Vrindavan pastimes to be material, he will be misled. My dear Lord Krishna, those who deride you, claiming that you have a material body like an ordinary man, are described in the Bhagavad Gita as demoniac and less intelligent. You are always transcendental. The non-devotees are cheated because they consider you to be a material creation. Actually, you have assumed this body, which exactly resembles that of an ordinary cowherd boy, simply to increase the devotion and transcendental bliss of your devotees. My dear Lord, I have nothing to say about people who advertise that they have already realized God, or that by their realization they have themselves become God. But as far as I am concerned, I admit frankly that for me, it is not possible to realize you by my body, mind, or speech. What can I say about you, or how can I realize you by my senses? I cannot even think of you perfectly with my mind, which is the master of the senses. Your qualities, your activities, and your body cannot be conceived of by any person within this material world. Only by your mercy can one understand to some extent what you are. My dear Lord, you are the Supreme Lord of all creation. And although I sometimes falsely think that I am master of this universe, although I sometimes may falsely think that I am the master of this universe, I may be the master. I may be the master of this universe, but there are innumerable universes, and there are also innumerable Brahmas who preside over these universes. But actually, you are the master of them all. As the super soul in everyone's heart, you know everything. Please, therefore, accept me as your surrendered servant. I hope that you will excuse me for committing the great offense of disturbing you in your pastimes with your friends and calves. Now, if you will kindly allow me, I will immediately leave so you can enjoy your friends and calves without my presence. My dear Lord, your very name suggests that you are all attractive. The attraction of the sun and the moon are all due to you. By the attraction of the sun, you are beautifying the very existence of the Yadu dynasty. With the attraction of the moon, you are enhancing the potency of the land, the demigods, the brahmanas, the cows, and the oceans. Because of your supreme attraction, demons like Kamsa and others are annihilated. Therefore, it is my deliberate conclusion that you are the only worshipable deity within the creation. Accept my humble obeisances until the annihilation of this material world. As long as there is sunshine within this material world, kindly accept my humble obeisances. In this way, Brahma, the master of this universe, after offering humble and respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and circumambulating him 3 times, was ready to return to his abode, known as Brahmaloka. By his gesture, the Supreme Personality of Godhead gave him permission to return. As soon as Brahma left, Lord Sri Krishna immediately returned to the bank of the Jamuna and rejoined his calves and cowherd boyfriends, who were situated just as they had been on the very day they had vanished. Krishna had left his friends on the bank of the Jamuna while they were engaged in lunch, and although he returned exactly 1 year later, the cowherd boys thought that he had returned within a second. That is the way Krishna's different energies act. It is stated in the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna himself has resided in everyone's heart, and he causes both remembrance and forgetfulness. Mata smritir jnanam apohanam cha. All living entities are controlled by the supreme energy of the Lord, and sometimes they remember, and sometimes they forget their constitutional position. His friends, being controlled in such a way, could not understand that for 1 whole year they were absent from their Jamuna's bank and were under the spell of Brahma's illusion. When Krishna appeared before the boys, they thought, Krishna has returned within a minute. They began to laugh, thinking that Krishna was not willing to leave their lunchtime company. They were very jubilant and invited him. Dear friend Krishna, you've come back so quickly. All right, we have not yet begun our lunch, not even taken 1 morsel of food, so please come and join us. Let us eat together. Krishna smiled and accepted their invitation, and he began to enjoy the lunchtime company of his friends. While eating, Krishna was thinking, "These boys believe that I have come back within a second, but they do not know that for the last year I have been involved with the mystic activities of Lord Brahma." After finishing their lunch, Krishna and his friends and calves began to return to their Vrajabhumi homes. While passing, they enjoyed seeing the dead carcass of Aghasura in the shape of a gigantic serpent. When Krishna returned home to Vrajabhumi, he was seen by all the inhabitants of Vrindavan. He was wearing a peacock feather in his helmet, which was also decorated with forest flowers. Krishna was also garlanded with flowers and painted with different colored minerals collected from the caves of Govardhan Hill. Govardhan Hill is always famous for supplying natural red oxides, and Krishna and his friends painted their bodies with them. Each of them had a bugle made of buffalo horn, and a stick, and a flute, and each called his respective calves by their particular names. The cowherd boys were so proud of Krishna's wonderful activities that while entering the village, they all sang his glories. All the gopis in Vrindavan saw beautiful Krishna entering the village. The boys composed nice songs describing how they were saved from being swallowed by the great serpent and how the serpent was killed. Some described Krishna as the son of Yashoda and others as the son of Nanda Maharaj. He is so wonderful that he saved us from the clutches of the great serpent and killed him, they said. But little did they know that 1 year had passed since the killing of Aghasura. So to them, it was just the last thing that happened. In this regard, Maharaj Parikshit asked Shukadeva Goswami how the inhabitants of Vrindavan suddenly developed so much love for Krishna, although he was not a member of any of their families. Maharaj Parikshit inquired, during the absence of the original cowherd boys, when Krishna expanded himself, that is, as the cowherd boys, why is it that the boys' parents became more loving toward him than toward their own sons? Also, why did the cows become so loving toward the calves more than toward their own calves? Shukadeva Goswami told Maharaj Parikshit that every living entity is actually most attached to his own self. Outward paraphernalia, such as home, family, friends, country, society, wealth, opulence, and reputation, are only secondarily in pleasing to the living entity. They please only because they bring pleasure to the self. For this reason, one is self-centered and is attached to his body and self more than he is to relatives like wife, children, and friends. If there is some immediate danger to one's own person, he first of all takes care of himself, then others. That's natural. That means he loves his own self more than anything else. The next most important object of affection after his own self is his material body. A person who has no information of the spirit soul is very much attached to his material body, so much so that even in old age he wants to preserve the body in many artificial ways, thinking that his old and broken body can be saved. Everyone is working hard, day and night, just to give pleasure to his own self, either under the bodily or spiritual concept of life. We are attached to material possessions because they give pleasure to the senses or to the body. The attachment to the body is there only because of I, in quotation marks, the spirit soul, is within the body. Similarly, when one is further advanced, he knows that the spirit soul is pleasing because it is part and parcel of Krishna. Ultimately, it is Krishna who is pleasing and all attractive. He is the super soul of everything, and in order to give us this information, Krishna descends and tells us that the all-attractive center is He Himself. Without being an expansion of Krishna, nothing can be attractive. Whatever is attracted within this cosmic manifestation is due to Krishna. Krishna is therefore the reservoir of all pleasure. The active principle of everything is Krishna, and highly elevated transcendentalists seeing everything in connection with Him. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is stated that a Mahabhagavata, or highly advanced devotee, sees Krishna as the active principle in all moving and non-moving living entities. Therefore, he sees everything within this cosmic manifestation in relation to Krishna. For the fortunate person who has taken shelter of Krishna as everything, liberation is already there. He is no longer in the material world. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. Whoever is engaged in devotional service of Krishna is always on the Brahma Bhuta, or spiritual platform. The very name Krishna suggests piety and liberation. Anyone who takes shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna enters the boat for crossing the ocean of nescience. For him, this vast expanse of the material manifestation becomes as insignificant as water in a calf's hoofprint. Krishna is the shelter of all great souls, and He is also the shelter of the material worlds. For one who is on the platform of Krishna consciousness, Vaikuntha, or the spiritual world, is not far away. He does not live within the material world, where there is danger at every step. In this way, Krishna consciousness was fully explained to Maharaj Parikshit by Shukadeva Goswami as he recited to the king the statements and prayers of Lord Brahma. These descriptions of Lord Krishna's pastimes with his cowherd boys, his eating with them on the bank of the Jamuna, and Lord Brahma's prayers unto him are also transcendental subject matters. Anyone who hears, recites, or chants them surely gets all his spiritual desires fulfilled. Thus, Krishna's childhood pastimes, his sporting with Brahma, Thus Krishna's childhood pastimes, his sporting with Balarama, and the cowherd boys in Vrindavan were described. That's good for us. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 14th chapter of Krishna, prayers offered by Lord Brahma to Lord Krishna.
Thank you very much for that reading. I don't know about anybody else, but certainly at times like this when, we're thinking of Bhakti True Swami, and just hearing from Krishna book has even more effect. So if anybody has comments or questions or any reflections from tonight's reading, go ahead and type those into the comment section underneath the video, and we'll read them out loud. We have a few already. Let's see. Tulsi Priya, she says, Jai Gurudev, thank you for reading. Could you please elaborate about the valuable goats mentioned earlier on? Where was it? That was up above, the valuable goats, yes. Persons who are engaged in performing great sacrifices and offering many valuable goats in sacrifice cannot attain the perfection of understanding you, but simply by devotional service, these innocent village women and cows are all able to satisfy you with their milk.
I assume that they're good, better, and best goats to be offered in sacrifice, and that also, I mean, sometimes these sacrifices were terrible for the number of goats that were, huge numbers of goats also that were offered in sacrifice.
Tulsi Priya also says, I like that part about, quote, spontaneously engaging all natural instincts in loving service to Krishna. Krishna is the most personal person.
Good point.
Yeah. And Gaura Shakti Prabhu says, Hare Krishna Gurudev, thank you for reading tonight. I love that it is mentioned that even if you're master of the universe, it's more like a universe, since there are many. It shows just how small and insignificant we really are.
Yeah, sometimes there's a story that Krishna was told that Brahma was waiting to see him, and he said, "Which Brahma?" Brahma, what? You mean there's others?
That's really funny.
Because they're bigger. He's actually in a very small universe because he has four heads, but the others have many, many, many heads because they're larger, more multi-dimensional universes apparently.
Yeah. That also reminds me of, in these prayers, one thing that struck out to me is, at this point, Lord Brahma's humility and how he was saying, if I am given the chance to grow as a humble blade of grass in this land, that would be a glorious birth for me. And I really appreciate that. I mean, this is coming from Lord Brahma. And sometimes we might hear people saying, "Oh, I hope I'm a gopi in the next life." And it's just, I mean, here's Lord Brahma just saying, if I could just be a blade of grass, and underlining the humility and how pride is not required in the spiritual world. Tulsi Priya also made a comment about the boys and their lunch. She says, Yoga Maya preserved the freshness of their tiffins that full year. They didn't even notice it.
Their tiffins.
And she says, I've heard these prayers so many times, but never before have they struck me as they did tonight. It really is beneficial on another level to hear from the spiritual master and realized souls. Thank you for making yourself available to us, and my apologies for making so many comments. Your comments are welcome, Tulsi. Very good. And Lavanga Manjari says, thank you for providing these peaceful Tuesday evening readings. I look forward to them all week. And thanks,
You're
Lavanga.
welcome.
And Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu says, as the founder of our sampradaya, Lord Brahma is understood to be a pure devotee, having realized his Svarupa. Is it normal for such a pure devotee to be unsatisfied in his own service and desire a different relationship with the Lord in the light of the high level of devotion offered by the residents of Raj?
I think Brahma is a very elevated position, and he's willing to do his service, but once he's fully enlightened about Krishna consciousness, he wants to be able to increase it in a certain way. And he is in the material world, and whenever you're in the material world, there's danger, and especially if you happen to have a big position and so on like that, it's more dangerous actually for you. So I think you would rather be an inhabitant of Vrindavan ultimately.
And Devadarana says, "It is always so pleasing when I realize how insignificant I am. Thank you for allowing me to hear this. Hare Krishna, dear soul, my obeisances to you."
It's good for all of us to realize how insignificant we are. The thing is that when humility increases, love for Krishna increases. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, the humility of devotees or of spiritual people is made fun of. Nietzsche called Christianity a slave religion because of this ideal of humility. But people who are humble or in the process of becoming humble do so not for its own sake, because as humility increases, love for Krishna increases, and that's what they want. And because they've discovered this proportion, then they really seek out humility more and more and more. Not for the humility's own sake at all, but for the sake of the fact that their love for Krishna increases.
There's also something like really just refreshing about just being real about,
yeah.
But
humility is realism, of course.
Yeah, just thinking like how much effort we put forward to in one way or another, promoting ourselves on gross or subtle levels, or just feeling like, yes, I am worthy, or whatever it is, and just being able to kind of relax. It has a kind of relaxation of like, okay, Krishna, this is, I am who I am. You know who I am, and
yeah.
And
besides, 1/10,000th the tip of a hair in size is pretty small. People from Bhaktivedanta Institute said it's 1/4 of an angstrom unit.
But at the same time, even that smallness, we still have that relationship with Krishna.
Yeah.
Krishna notices us still.
He does. He actually wants to have a relationship with us. That means we have something to contribute.
It's like it's not too small for Krishna to notice.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting. And Shaila Vasini Devidasi says, "Hare Krishna Gurudev, please at my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada." She said that earlier on. And any other comments or anything coming down before we sign off? Oh, Adi Gopi. Thanks for joining us, Adi Gopi. She asks, how can devotees maintain their humility when put in leadership positions? That's a good topic.
Well, that should be an occasion of becoming even more humble, because you screw up all the time and you immediately get so many enemies just because you have that position. That's part of it, But Prabhupada just told us, always remember you're the servant. And one should be alert to, because pride wants to creep up while you're not looking. And you suddenly find yourself, becoming proud of something, and you have to be kind of diligent about that also. Leadership in some ways is a sacrifice, because you're bound to that position and you're required to do so many things, and so you should just treat it as a sacrifice. And the more you can do it to help other people, that's the real advantage of some leadership, is you can do things to serve Prabhupada or Krishna or different devotees and all on. That should be why you should want a position like that. It's real value.
And dare I say, another place to practice humility is our interactions or our thoughts, or how we speak of people in positions of leadership.
Yeah, that's true. You should appreciate the sacrifice they make.
Yeah, it's certainly not an easy position, and and I just find it's easy to say, they don't know what they're doing.
Oh, it's interesting. You somehow get such a position. Immediately, you have enemies, just because you have that position. All right, that's everything.
Mm-hmm.
We can look forward next week to the chapter 15, the killing of Dhenukasura.
Yes, that'll be next week, and this Friday and Saturday, Ravindra Svarupa is speaking at 10:45 a.m. As part of this holy name retreat, and yes, and then we'll have Bhagavatam class on Sunday as well at a regular time at 3:00.
Very good. Until then, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Krishna book ki jai.